And moving on, protests have been continuing outside the Britannia International Hotel in Canary Wharf after a busload of migrants were moved in during the early hours of Saturday. Presumably, Bev, Dawn, they thought if they did it in the early hours, nobody would notice.
Straight away.
Nobody's going to notice.
Got my name badge.
Nobody's going to notice.
No, I know.
And it just makes it worse, doesn't it?
It is worse. I mean, the thing is, this is my local area. I live in East London. I live in Tower Hamlets. That's my local council. And this is a really nice hotel. It is a 4-star hotel in the financial area of London. And we have in my local borough, it's one of the poorest boroughs in London as well, we have 3,200 homeless families in the borough, OK? And half the children live in poverty. But they can... It's not even Tower Hamlets' fault, to be honest with you, because Tower Hamlets weren't given a choice.
Well, no, it's imposed
by the government and said, we're putting migrants up in this hotel.
Yeah.
But can you imagine if you're a little kid living down the road there?
Yeah.
Sort of like, you know, in terrible accommodation.
And it's around £80 a night if you want to stay there as a guest.
Oh, yeah, good luck with getting a room there for £80 a night. I'll tell you what, you're not. You're really not going to. Yeah. If you want to stay there at a weekend, it's about £200 a night. It's ridiculous.
So there have been many more protests, which include many women and children, and they were sparked by that lack of community consultation and concerns about safety and cohesion.
Yes, OK. To tell us more is journalist Jack Hadfield, who has been down there reporting from the actual protest. Jack, good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Now, I know, I mean, some of the women I know who work in the Canary Wharf area were down there wearing their pink and singing songs. And it was a really nice, peaceful protest about women and girls and their safety and their rights, which sounded like a good thing, but it seemed to have been hijacked, unfortunately.
Yeah, so the thing with that is obviously the women and girls protest, the women and children protest was a march that started just after 12 from the Jubilee tube station in Canary Wharf, where they marched down towards the Britannia Hotel, you know, singing "What do we want? Stop the boats when we want them now," etc. And they obviously then continued their protest with a peaceful sit-in outside the Britannia Hotel in the middle of the road there. But what happened when those other men, those masked men, turned up later on, that was actually part of a second protest that was scheduled at 3 p.m. For that day. So the community organised 2 protests, the first being just for the women and children, all together in pink, and then the second one for 3 p.m. was for everybody else to turn up to make those voices heard. So when those men turned up with balaclavas and flares, that was just before 3 p.m, just as part of the second protest.
And did they do it just to deliberately disrupt the protest?
No, I believe they were there, you know, to have a show of force in that, you know, that they were, they were standing up, you know, for themselves. They didn't want to be intimidated by, obviously, the migrants in the hotel who obviously have been intimidating the women and girls around. You know, we all know, obviously, the sexual assault cases that sparked off some of these protests. We just heard about, obviously, Nuneaton, just heard of the attempted kidnapping charge in Manchester just yesterday. And obviously, Epping started off the sexual assault charge.
And what do we know about these migrants who've arrived at this hotel in Canary Wharf, and why did they think it was clever to bring them in the early hours, Jack?
Well, I think one reason why they brought them in the early hours is because people had been standing around outside the Britannia Hotel pretty much most of the time. Even when there weren't protests, there were usually around 5 to 10 people just keeping watch. And clearly, the government didn't want there to be the big signs of everybody being bussed in one go. But unfortunately for them, somebody was still keeping watch at 1:33 in the morning.
This is just not a good look, is it, Andrew? It's like, you know, they're almost like, you know, well, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it under the cover of darkness, so we avoid causing more social unrest, which leads to more social unrest.
I know, and we think about 30 went in?
Yes, that's probably around that number, just off the coach. I've seen footage from other people in the local area who have been, you know, capturing images of the migrants going in and out of the hotel. I haven't seen any more coach loads. I think it would be hard for them to get anybody else in other than that. So one coach load would probably be about my current estimation for how many are in the hotel.
And are they predominantly young men in their 30s?
Yep. No, I haven't seen any footage of women and children. The only footage I've seen are those who are protesting outside the hotel.
Yeah.
And you covered the Epping protests as well, didn't you? It's a similar kind of vibe, I'm assuming.
Yes, I believe Epping will be doing a women and girls protest, everyone turning up in pink on Friday. I believe that's their plan. So I think this is spreading more. Obviously, the first Epping protest I went to 2 weeks ago on last Sunday, there were, women and girls standing out first. But I think the whole pink messaging, everyone turning up in pink, just to really highlight the threat that these asylum seekers pose to some of the most vulnerable community members, is I think is going to be spreading and will catch on throughout some of the other protests throughout the country.
And were there any anti-racist protesters down there as well?
No, there wasn't. There weren't any at all at the Britannia on Sunday. Obviously, I did see some at the Thistle City on Saturday, where Antifa turned up in droves and really got in with the police there.
Tell me more about that one, because I was covering that here on Saturday, and just watching the scenes from the hotel, it seemed quite intimidating.
It really, really was. The thing is, of course, Antifa, who turned up with an unscheduled protest alongside the Stand Up to Racism protest, which had been scheduled and allowed to take place. They just stood in the middle of the crossroads, blocking it. Now, these people don't like to be filmed, unlike all of the other anti-asylum protesters who are always happy to speak to me, happy to speak to the press. Antifa, when I was having my phone camera moving around, a lot of them were flipping me off, swearing. I did not want to get too close to these people for fear of being clocked in the jaw.
And they're the ones wearing masks and balaclavas. And why do you think they are so keen to hide their identity? If they're just protesting innocently about sort of anti-racism, why are they so keen to hide their identity?
Well, it's funny. I think a lot of them have this idea that the British state is completely out to get them rather than being more on their side. They're very paranoid about cops infiltrating everywhere, whereas in terms of how the state organises against these groups of people overall, the ire, especially of the intelligence services, focus far more on what they would call the far right than the far left by any measure.
Just fine before we go, how did the locals get onto the fact that they were going to go to that hotel? Because it'd been widely assumed they were going in there. How do they get it? How do they find these things out?
So I believe in the case of the Britannia, a few days before it had happened, guests who had booked in obviously had their bookings cancelled. So they started posting on booking.com, etc.
Yeah.
And then the day before, so the Monday, so this was the Sunday previously, residents in the local buildings, there's one building right next to the Britannia, were then informed by the security that morning that it was becoming a migrant hotel.
So people had their bookings cancelled because the migrants came first.
Exactly.
Jack Hadfield, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Now, we've
Jack,
got a statement here from the Metropolitan Police which says officers policed a protest for a considerable time today, but a group remained who were harassing occupants of the hotel and staff, trying to prevent people accessing the hotel to make deliveries and making concerted efforts to breach the fencing and access the hotel.
Their actions went well beyond protest to harassment, and we used powers under the Criminal Justice and Police Act 2021 to order that specific group to leave and not return for 28 days. If a different group wishes to protest in the vicinity of the hotel, they are not banned from doing so, providing they do so lawfully.